Call our meeting of the Natural Resources Committee of the City of Oregon City to order. And our first agenda item is indeed Library Director Maureen Cole, who wants to fill us in on plans for a new library.
Let me know if you need any help.
For sure.
Problems.
Yeah, I'll do that in a minute. So, hi, good evening. Thank you so much for letting me invite myself to your meeting. What we are trying to do, and I was going to have a cohort in crime, the library board director, but he got called into film with Grimm, which I would much rather do too. So he's off being filmed in Grimm, which is pretty cool, huh? Anyway, so what we're trying to do is go to each of the advisory committees whose subject area might be impacted or touched by the library project at all, you know, just even the littlest bit, and just bring you up to speed on what's going on. So I've already been to see Parks and Rec Advisory Committee a couple of weeks ago, and then I'll go to Transportation, and, you know, just so that we all have kind of a working knowledge of this project. So as hopefully you know, we're going to add on to the existing Carnegie building. That site designation was approved by the commission on June 19th. And at that point in time, we said, okay, we're going to take about 6 months to go out and verify some assumptions we have about cost and about working on this site. And so we had a parking study, a geotech study, and a tree study done. And no huge red flags appeared. And I don't know if you know, but we did purchase a parking lot that's on the corner of Jefferson and 7th. It's a 19-space parking lot that's right in front of the dental building and the H&R block. Mm-hmm. So even if we just use that for staff and get them off the street, that just really helps alleviate some of the worries that we had about parking. But we may do way more as far as, like, we may do some diagonal spaces and stuff like that to help with other things. And obviously ADA, we don't have handicap parking right now, so we still have a lot more work, but we did purchase that to help kind of just help get that red flag out of the works. So so the studies verified that there's no red flags that we weren't already aware of. You know, there's we know we should build in the warm months. There's water flowing underground. It'll be less water flowing underground in the warm months. There'll be less water flowing from above in the warm months, so that's when we should start our building. You know, but so we're building in a park, and this is one reason that I wanted to talk to you and why I wanted to talk to the PRAC group, is that we are going to be taking up some park space, and a tree or two may have to come down, but we're not sure where we're building yet because we don't have a specific design. I mean, we know where, but we don't know, you know. So anyway, I don't know if you've seen these images, but we hired THA, which is the architect in Portland that has done a lot of libraries, and they did 3 images for us, just so that people could see what it would look like. Oh, sorry. No, what it could potentially look like in the back. So what we decided is that there's a lot of space behind, because, you know, that's where the concerts in the park are, that is well used by concerts in the park, but that's like, you know, 6 times a year or something, and that's really the most use it gets. But if we built back there, it would balance the historical building. If it was onto the sides, architects and library board and commissioners, it kind of overpowers the existing building. But when it's in the back, it could be balanced behind it. So they did 1 2-story image and 2 1-story images. And the 1-story image, as you can imagine, takes up way more park space because it's more spread out. The nice thing about the 2-story image is it is more condensed, and it saves more of the park space. Now, none of the things that we did, though, impact the playground area at all. You know, we preserve that. We feel like very important to preserve that, especially since we just put a whole bunch of money into the wading pool. You know, we don't want to go tearing that out. But one of the images they did of the 1-story images had a green roof that actually was like lawn covered. And it was really interesting. I should have brought it, but it kind of sloped down here to the grass. And there are several people who really like that because it kind of like lifts the part up and makes it doesn't do away with grass. It actually just lifts it up on top of the roof, which is interesting. But this is the image that the city commission loved. As soon as they saw this, they just loved it because they felt like it really fit well with the building, because it picks up some of the architectural elements of the original building. And I'm just starting to learn about historically designated buildings, and you probably know quite a bit about this.
Not as much as Christina.
Yeah, Christina's an expert, and my new best friend. But when you add on to a historical building, it has to be very evident which part is the historic building. So they don't really want you to like mimic the building exactly, because they don't want it to be fuzzy at all in people's mind which part is the historic. So you can pick up elements of what's existing, but you can't like have it identical. And so that's why like at Atkinson Church you kind of have an extreme example of not looking at all like the historic building. I mean, you definitely know where one stops and the other starts. You know, and I think what we're going to end up doing is picking up some elements of the historic building. Yeah. So like, for instance, these things, whatever these are called, you know, is kind of mimicked over here. And the brick lines, these lines are kind of continued over there.
How do the two buildings connect? I mean, is the back wall still intact of the...
You know, I don't know that part yet. They will connect, but I don't know if we like take out the back wall or open it up a little bit more or what. I don't really know the specifics of that, and I have a lot of questions about that myself. So, but it becomes one building. So we're going to be sharing like heating and cooling, one system, you know, that kind of thing. But you know, this was improved in 2001, and it was got seismic upgrades and ADA upgrades and all that stuff. So mostly I wanted to come and let you know that, you know, we went and talked to the City Commission last night to bring them up to speed on our progress. And our next steps are putting out RFPs for the architect and the project manager and all that stuff and proceeding down the road. So this is going in, and, you know, we'd love to get your feedback on it and make sure that we end up with a library that is not just what Oregon City needs, but also respects and maintains the park that it is situated in. You know, and one of our goals from the very outset was to maintain the integrity of the existing historic building, but also the park setting. And so that's what we're after.
Yeah. Has this been designed to the point to know how high the ground in the back is going to be? No,
it hasn't. In fact, you know, because the architect has not actually even been, you know, determined yet. It's a little funky in the back, I can tell you. What I'm hoping is that we can figure out a way to have an entrance on Jefferson and have it be street level, especially since we bought that parking lot across the street. Because one of the reasons I would hate to have it a building so close to the street and for people to still have to walk all the way around to this. It just doesn't feel very accessible, you know? And one of the complaints we get is for people who need handicap parking and who have trouble getting into the building. So I'm hoping that all those elevations can be worked out, but it's kind of funky back there on Jefferson and the slope and the grade of the hill. So.
And part of the site plan design review criteria for institutional and commercial buildings actually does require direct access from the public street and a certain amount of windows on the public street. So those are all things that are in the code, and they may or may not be required in the situation, but if you need variances from those, you have to ask for them.
Okay,
So
that's good to
we'll
know.
talk about that.
Planners are your friends in projects like this.
Yeah, so
you know.
part of, those are actual requirements in the code.
Yeah.
One thing I would see is possibility, I'm not sure what the grade is like, is to go into the second floor from the upper street.
Well, that's the idea.
Yeah.
If it works, that would be the best. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's way too steep to go into the ground floor.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
But maybe even fill up against the building 1 floor high and then
Right.
have your access on top of that.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's the way it's going to work out. It's just that it's not clear from this that it would be the right height. I think
Yeah, it's not.
we're gonna have to play with it.
And you don't know about the groundwater situation either. How high is that anyway?
Well, there's groundwater. Yeah. Right. We
Yeah,
know
so-
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a library for the 21st century, for Oregon City and stuff. So, what are we talking about, like in terms of like LEED certified, energy conservation, or maybe even solar panels on the roof?
Right. That's all being discussed, and we're going to have to make some decisions about that, dependent on the site and what's works best on the site with the tree coverage that we have and all that kind of thing. But yeah, absolutely, we want it to be the most sustainable building that we can build. The LEED certification is worked into the budget, and as you know, sometimes that is more paper than anything else. We can do a lot of those things without getting the actual certification, and we would naturally want to do those things. So that's up for discussion, but it's in the budget. So, yeah.
Is a possibility of like energy generation as part of like the design?
Actual generation.
Well, solar panels are getting cheaper by the moment.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we have those at home, and we generate quite a bit from those every morning when we hear them click
'Cause it
on. We
looks
go,
like a
we're
flat- is
making
that-
money, honey. Yeah.
Is that a flat roof, kind of?
Oops.
Looks,
Almost
Yeah.
flat.
I don't know. This is like really so initial that
Yeah.
we just don't have those details worked out.
Yeah, and for historical review board, the historical review board would also look at the design as well. So there's certain factors that they're interested in, and one of their concerns might be, are you screening your solar panels from the side view because they're not historically appropriate?
Sure.
They have some oversight on that.
yeah.
You can't use them, but it's that they can't be visible from the street.
Yeah, one idea that might be good to look at is a living roof, because they're a real good insulating thing, and
Right.
and there's a wide variety of plants that are suitable in our area.
Right,
The one down at Tri-City Sewer Plant, they stuck to the most, a really limited range. And they could have done a lot more entertaining group of plants there. But anyway, that's something to look at, and you could incorporate that in with solar panels so that they're hidden at the same level as this growing surface. So
Yeah, good idea.
yeah,
Pete, does the city have standards whether or not there could be increased runoff from the site from like a pre-development condition?
The engineering department and the stormwater and design manual has a threshold of impervious surface that would be triggered. I think it's 2,000 square feet additional that triggers a stormwater report.
Okay.
And how that is handled.
yeah, that
And to the extent that they can, they're trying to promote low-impact development standards, but they haven't adopted them yet. But they are relying on the Clean Water Services model that's used in the Tualatin River Basin right now, and are moving towards a formal adoption of that. It's pretty long-term.
So that, given the size of this, would be applicable here.
What's that?
Given the size of the building, it'd apply because of the.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it would.
Yeah, we're planning on adding 15,000 square feet on 2 floors. So a lot of things are going to kick in for us. We're going to be threading the needle on historical, all kinds of stuff that we're going to be reviewed by. So this is going to be a very well-reviewed building.
That's
Yeah.
for sure. The city ones generally.
Yeah.
Good to be.
But anyway, I just wanted to make sure you knew that this was going on. It's in a park. We are very much taking as much care as possible to not impact the park and leave, the integrity of the park in place, because we very much value our setting. so much, because a large part of that whole picture is the park. And we really want that to be there for generations to come to enjoy, not just the building, but the setting. And you can reach me at the library. And I should have brought some of my cards, but yikes. Wait, I might have some. You want my card if I can dig some up?
Sure.
Okay.
Good.
Thanks, Mo.
You never have them when you need them. Okay. It may be a little worse for the wear. Make sure I haven't drawn any pictures on.
It might be valuable.
Or something, you know?
Thank you.
Somebody's phone number, right?
Pithy library epithets.
All right.
Great.
So
Thanks
thank
very
you-
much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Good
welcome.
luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Mo.
Okay, we've got, do we have any public comments on non-agenda items? Okay.
We don't, but we do have a couple of representatives from the Academy.
Okay.
The First Adventist Academy. That's great. Thanks for coming tonight.
Okay. And we don't seem to have a quorum, so I don't think we can do any of the consent items. So we will go ahead and skip the approval of the minutes. And do you want to go ahead with the overview of the Natural Resources
Yes.
Overlay District?
So what I'll do is I'll talk first from where I'm sitting now, and then I'd like to bring up some things on the laptop on the projector screen, and you can see them on your monitors.
Okay.
So I'll talk sort of generally about the code and the Natural Resources Overlay District, and please feel free to interrupt me or clarify anything I have to say. I haven't done a lot of preparation for this presentation, but I'm confident that I can explain it fairly well. So
Pete, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Given kind of like the relevance of this to this committee, I'm
Yeah.
wondering, does it make sense? Maybe I wonder if we get more people here, because it'd be a shame to have half the committee
Well,
know or understand this and half of them not. Or does that make sense? I'm just wondering.
I'm happy to present tonight or at other meetings as well.
yeah, so it's not one or the other, in
No.
other words.
Sure.
He can repeat himself all over.
Yeah, and we
in
are
a couple
on,
of months.
I
in
know
other words.
Richard said he's watching on streaming video, so hi,
okay.
Richard.
That's good.
Well, that's good.
If you're out there somewhere.
Hi, Richard.
So let me pull up some of these documents.
I bet you he was laughing when he said that too.
We're I on the right section here. Okay. All right. So I'm first looking at the document, which is my staff report, and it provides some basic background on what the Natural Resource Overlay District is supposed to be doing. So the overlay district is a combination of a map and a code. And the map and the code work together, and they represent the identified habitat and associated functions of streams, wetlands, riparian corridors, and habitat associated with those stream buffers that the city has knowledge of. And the code that we have in place is intended to be in compliance with Metro Title III and Title 13 of the Regional Metro Urban Growth Functional Management Plan. So those are the water quality resource, and habitat conservation titles of the Metro Code, and they're implemented differently in different cities. And in the county as well. So Oregon City, and Shaw probably knows quite a bit about the original Water Resource Overlay District, because that, I think, was first adopted in the 1990s. And since the 1990s, that code has been updated, and the most recent update to the original Title III Water Resource Code was the Natural Resource Overlay District Code, which was adopted in 2010, initially in 2000, and then updated. I think it was reviewed in 2008, adopted in 2010, and then since that time it's been functioning as a combined overlay district. As a regulatory document, it has to contain both a clear and objective set of standards as well as a discretionary review process. So an applicant can be reviewed under a Type 2 clear and objective staff review process, but if they want a variance or some kind of discretion to alter standards in that code, it has to be reviewed by the Planning Commission, and that has to be reviewed as a Type 3 level decision with a public hearing. And there are certain aspects of the code that trigger that. Any deviation from the stated clear and objective standards requires a Type 3 review. So that's kind of the way it's supposed to function. It also relies on a series of documents that have been compiled over the years, including the original Title III overlay that we have, the Water Resource Overlay maps, the 1999 wetland inventory that was done by Shapiro and Associates for the purposes of the Comprehensive Plan Periodic Review, and that was brought into the 2003 Comprehensive Plan Review. When a development is proposed on a tax lot which is touched by the Natural Resource Overlay District, it will trigger a review at some level. The review may consist of seeing what the extent of the buffer is on the tax lot, and then depending on how extensive that buffer is, then an owner will need to provide a field verified site-specific delineation of the feature that the city has a map of. And these features may change location. They may not have a healthy vegetated corridor. They may have a degraded situation going on. And then the development proposal includes a natural resources overlay district application concurrently with whether it's a site plan or land use or subdivision or whatever kind of land use review. It also has that component, that second application with it. So it's also intended to implement Clean Water Act requirements for shading of streams and reduction of water temperatures. So it does help facilitate other parts of the city's policies and codes, like the stormwater requirements as well. Although it's not strictly related to that, it's related to it works in concert with that, because many of the city's storm ponds also function within the Natural Resource Overlay District or partially touch it. And so whenever a city storm pond or a wetland or something that's not on the inventory is touching the Natural Resources District to a certain extent, I think at least half of it actually has to touch it, it is brought into the Natural Resources Overlay District as part of a subsequent review. There are lots and developments that predated the regulations, so those are called pre-existing developments, and there's a provision in the code that allows maintenance of pre-existing situations, provided no new impervious surface areas are put down. And an example of that might be the Blue Heron site, which will need to do a natural resources overlay review, but you're talking about an area that is largely impervious surface already and is buildable site. So they will not, the natural resources overlay will work there, and they will probably be reviewed as a pre-existing situation. But it gets fairly complicated.
So if
Yeah.
I actually have an example in mind where
Okay.
there was
Yeah.
really old platted lots,
Right.
like well over 106, I think it was 1865. They've never been built, but they're still sitting there. And there's a developer looking at them, and it's a major creek corridor. So do those lots get to be developed despite the fact that they'd be in an overlay district?
Well, you may have more than one overlay in that situation. A lot of times, so bear in mind that the geologic hazard overlay district has separate standards which regulate density.
Yeah.
The natural resource overlay district says that if you have a lot of record that is more than 75% covered by the district boundary, depending on whether it's residential or commercially zoned underneath,
Yeah.
there's a maximum disturbance area allowed in the code. And I think for a residential lot, it is 2,500 square feet. So depending on how many lots are actually legally platted, so you have to establish the legality of the lot first,
Right.
see whether it's legally created and not just created for tax purposes. Based on that, then you would look at what the allowable disturbance area is in the lot of record. They would have to do the impact analysis and the mitigation plan. And,
I
yeah.
believe that these,
Yeah.
I think it's like 10 lots, they're in a single ownership at this point.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
does that figure in?
The single ownership clause is in the geologic hazard overlay district.
Okay.
And that kicks in and says if you've got a lot or several lots under single ownership, from a safety perspective on a steep slope, you can only get the one house for that area that's over 25% slope. So there's a severe limitation on density in that situation, which would probably preempt the natural resource allowance.
I
Yeah.
think part of the
Yeah.
area is flattish and part is quite steep.
Yeah, they would need
So-
to do the survey, look at the proportions of the property that fall within certain slope categories, and then
And
do a
there's-
density calculation based
and,
on that.
And you've got a perennial stream,
Yeah,
and
Mm-hmm.
it's
yeah. So there would be a minimum setback from the top of bank in the stream in all cases. There are provisions for density reduction, but it sounds as if that would be a type 3 decision, just based on what you're telling me. It's not going to be a
it's a
slash
real
level
situation.
review.
It's being offered to a developer as we
Okay.
speak,
Okay.
who
Yeah.
thinks that since they're platted, he can go ahead and develop.
We'll
1865.
be happy to look at the plat and go through the overlay review with them.
Okay.
So that's the quick overview of the code. I did not mention the verification process, which we used to call the exemption process. There is a process for verification of the natural resource overlay district location, where it is absolutely obvious. It's either absolutely obvious based on measurements on the ground and observation of the soil and water and plant conditions on the ground that water resource isn't there. Generally speaking, verifications cannot be approved by staff unless those specific criteria are met, because we're not wetland specialists and we don't know what water resource. So if there's any discretion involved with respect to a verification, the burden becomes the applicant's to turn in a site-specific report that says that those habitat features are no longer present on the site, and that would depend on their digging soil pits, looking at hydrological conditions, making a survey of the plant species on the site, and that sort of thing. So those are done occasionally. The way the buffer is established is based on whether the water feature, the size of the area that the water feature is draining, and whether it's a perennial or intermittent stream or a wetland. So the buffer area prescribed by the code varies from 15 feet to 50 feet to 200 feet for a salmon-bearing stream or a tributary to those. And that's what's reflected on the map. And I think I put a copy of the map up as an example. So Metro found our Natural Resource Overlay District map to be in substantial compliance with Title 13 and 3 based on those corridors. What the NROD doesn't do a great job of is upland habitat protection. It's only required to protect what are called moderate and high value habitat conservation areas from the Metro map. When they did the analysis for the habitat conservation areas, they said that low value habitat conservation areas and what are called allow areas, which are up and away from streams, did not have to have the same protections as the moderate and high. And so to a large extent, we went through the process in 2008 and 2010 with Metro's biologists and planners and established that there was so much overlap between the habitat conservation areas and the stream buffers that were prescribed in our Title III code that for all intents and purposes, that was the same overlay district. And there are a few areas that aren't, but they are more than made up for by the buffers that are prescribed in the Title III code. So there was a lot of graphing and calculations that we went through with Metro to establish that. And it is fairly prescriptive on how it affects development.
Pete?
Yes.
I got one question. Overlay district, if you're a private property owner and you have like an invasive plant species on your property and like in adjacent areas don't have that present, are you in any way required to keep that from spreading from your property to other properties?
I think that's in the nuisance code part of the Oregon City Municipal Code. What the overlay district says is that certain uses do not require planning approval, and those are, removal of invasive species, maintenance of existing structures, etc. So there's a list of exempt uses, but it doesn't prohibit something like that.
So
I think
you
if
had
someone
ivy or blackberry
Yeah.
in the adjacent area didn't have it and you let yours kind of spread out
Yeah.
to adjacent properties, you're not.
I think you could probably be cited, but we haven't had a code enforcement complaint to know if that would actually work yet. It's an interesting question. We would cite him under the nuisance code because that has a noxious weed prohibition separately. Anything that would be on the Oregon City nuisance plan list, you're supposed to control on your property, and that's regulated separately.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a list of exempt uses, which are things where you're not doing anything that would hurt the overlay district and don't require any kind of review. That's listed. There's a list of prescribed uses, which are uses that require planning review. And then there's a list of uses that are planning commission approval type uses. Crossing a wetland with any kind of road, utility, public, anything that's a structural building footprint increase within the NROD buffer, and various other things. So I was going to show you an example of how this functioned with the Hilltop Mall expansion, because it's a fairly good and good example of a highly visible natural resource overlay area that includes a wetland. Do the screen thing here. So bear with me while I do this. Takes a while to click on. Okay. So let's pull up a different segment. All right. So let me describe for you where we're at. This is a map of the area directly adjacent to the Hilltop Movie Theater. So where I'm waving my cursor here.
Behind it where the ducks are?
Right, where the ducks are, yeah. This is Beaver Creek Road coming into the Red Soils campus, and to the east of here is the Safeway store. Where the cursor is here is the truck bay, and the Safeway store is right over here, just off to the edge, right side of the screen. Then you've got the sidewalk along Beaver Creek Road and the ditch, which is an actual delineated state-confirmed wetland. And when Danielson's was built and Beaver Creek Road was realigned so that it would tee into Malala Avenue, that ditch was relocated, but its status as a wetland never changed. Subsequently, it's squeezed right between the back of the sidewalk where Beaver Creek Road is here and the existing parking lot of the Hilltop Mall site. When they did the master plan for Safeway, they did a wetland delineation of that buffer area and requested a 10 to 20 foot variance of the buffer from the Planning Commission, and showed exactly how much in square feet their parking lot for this future restaurant pad was going to impact that. And at the time that they proposed that, it was essentially just a grassy bank. And what they've done to mitigate the impact of that restaurant pad is replant the buffer area with native plant species, and I've got a list of those. They are also required to turn in an impact analysis and then a mitigation plan, and the code requires that the number of the amount of the impact area, the amount of the mitigation area is calculated as twice that of the impact area. So they come up with a square foot calculation for how much mitigation they need to do, and then they apply a planting density for trees and shrubs, and that's what they end up planting. What these numbers show here is where their photo points are for their mitigation and monitoring plan that they've turned in yearly since the site was established. So we've got 2 years now of photo points, and I've got some pictures of those which I'd like to show you. This is the wetland report that was turned in by ESA. So it's Environmental Science and Assessments, a wetland biologist company, and they were contracted by the Hilltop Mall developers to do this assessment and write responses to the code. And this report talks about it in detail and provides a series of maps. They looked at the following sources: the wetland inventory I mentioned earlier, topographic maps, soil survey maps, our natural resources map and aerials, Metro map, and Google Earth. And then they did their on-site investigation. They detail how they do that. They follow the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Wetland Delineation Manual, 1987 edition. And they also take aerial photos. Here they talk about how they delineated the waterway. They define the ordinary high water line. They talk about the slope and the bank. And they talk about the current vegetated community.
Can you go back,
Sure.
way back? They were talking about no something, connectivity or something was found, no, I saw it. At the beginning?
Don't know.
Was.
Okay.
I think no downstream link.
No
to
downstream
waterways,
link to
wetlands.
waterways or wetlands is evident.
Yeah,
I think
see, and
it's
that
because
that connects directly
into
to
the
the
storm
main-
pipe.
well
right.
into
yeah.
the main channel of
Mill Creek.
Canyon,
Right,
where they're having all
exactly.
the incisions. So
Right. And
something-
upstream from it is a wetland as well.
That's right.
Right, right.
So
Yeah. So
we
what
might
they're
say-
saying, I think they're meaning open channel. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it goes into storm pipe, goes under Molalla Avenue, and then it daylights
well,
again.
and no
yeah.
impacts to downstream fish habitat will likely result from the proposed work on culvert upgrades.
Well, that's what they're saying, and then that
Yes.
gets reviewed by David Evans and Associates, and those who is the city's wetland consultant.
Right.
So,
So in
yeah.
in this process,
Mhm.
I wasn't there, so
Right.
I don't know. But it seems like the mitigation that they're doing, they're increasing stormwater because they're putting in an impervious surface for parking for a restaurant. Is that right?
That's not necessarily going all into the ditch. They actually built underground detention tanks to take a lot of that
Uh-huh.
as well. So they weren't channeling it directly into that creek. They had a separate stormwater management plan that went through by the engineering department in order to meet the stormwater design standards as well. So this doesn't take the place of their stormwater management at all.
Okay.
I just want to stress that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I-
yeah.
the planting, I just don't understand. The
I'm getting to that. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I understand there's quite an extensive
Oh, yeah.
series of pipes there to capture and store water over some period of time.
Yeah, I mean, there's about a 50-foot easement that crosses the front of this site where the old roadway used to be.
Mhm.
And that was a major issue during the site plan review because there was no way to place a building over the top of that easement. And the code requires that buildings be placed close to the street for public walking and access, but they could not do that. So they've set the building back on the backside of the easement. And they still wanted to build this future restaurant pad, and subsequently that was one of the Planning Commission's review of that, was because it was a type 3 review where they're actually requested to reduce the buffer.
He-
Yeah.
Given kind of like the location, kind of the isolation
Mm-hmm.
of it, was there any possibility of like making a contribution instead to like a mitigation bank where everything, the value of what was done there might have been relocated to an area that maybe makes it a little bit more biological, botanical? So, I'm
That
just-
was not done with this project, but that has been done with public works projects,
Was
like
that
the
an
jug
option?
handle.
Was that an option here?
It is an option, but they did not propose that as an option.
Yeah, I was just-
yeah.
I'm trying to figure
It's not
out.
a code requirement, but it could be, the primary preference is on-site mitigation and increasing the value of the habitat that's on the site. So part of their analysis was saying, well, they're looking at a fairly degraded drainage way and improving the overall habitat value of the area through plantings, and that was what they proposed here.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is there's no conductivity between
Mhm.
other natural features in this. It's kind of an island, a sea of concrete.
Yeah, it is, but it does connect to a larger wetland upstream, which potentially could be improved as well.
Okay.
So, the area to the north behind the theater, there's a portion of that is owned by the city, and the Public Works Department has been looking at that to improve that.
Okay.
Just through a restoration plan, not as a development, but as through an enhancement. We're hoping that we could get a grant to do that in the future and provide an actual trail and public access, and that would connect to this and create a greater environment within the city where people could actually go and see it, because it's got great public visibility from every side. And it could help. What could help it is a little more interpretation. Yeah. So here's the summary of their encroachment. Their access road buffer encroachment was 439 square feet. The bridge and trail within the buffer was 120 square feet. The culvert head wall was 631. And that was a total of 1,200 square feet. So the proposed mitigation that they're doing on site was 2,380 square feet of plantings. So that's the 2-to-1 ratio required in the code. The planting calculations are just a straight mathematical calculation. So mitigation plantings per area, 45 trees and 45 shrubs. So that was the planting, all native plants, and then they also use a native wildflower and grass mix. And these were the species lists and the seeding rate for the grass and forb mix. Then we get into the tree and shrub species. And then an appendix of figures,
Oops.
Which appears to be,
As long as the computer
Blank.
keeps it to itself.
wouldn't you know it? Let's try that again.
Pete, there's no reported nutria even upstream of the site or anything, is there?
They did tell me that they had beavers quite regularly, but they had to relocate those because they were chewing on the seedlings.
Oh, the beaver
Yeah.
railroad-
Upstream?
Oh, yeah.
Upstream?
I don't know. I don't know about nutria.
Oh, no, I was saying beaver and nutria either way because they really don't protect the plants.
Right.
It's
So
just
at
a solid-
the mitigation and monitoring that they need to do is for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years, it has to be 80% established of what they planted. So that's what they're doing, and
So there are beaver around the...
that's
soil?
what they said. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
Kind
been a
of remarkable.
problem, and so they're having to put the wire around the plants and that sort of thing. Where's the 2012? So I'm going to open up these. Sorry. This will work. This is a photo from east to west, looking down the ditch towards the Safeway site. So this is from 2012. That's looking west to east along Beaver Creek Road. These are, so this was taken during the winter time when they're not in leaf. So
What's the purpose of the plantings?
the purpose? It's the idea behind revegetating with native plants is just to establish a native planting vegetative corridor as required by Title III. That's invasive species. If they took care of all the invasive species before they planted the native species, and so they've got to keep that invasive species out of there. The city storm crews also maintain that ditch as well, so it has to be sort of a balance between keeping the ditch flowing somewhat, but also keeping it as a wetland habitat. There's a wildlife benefit to having a native species there, definitely bird life and that sort of thing. But that's the reason and the purpose behind it. The overall purpose of the overlay and the buffer width is a combination of habitat value and water quality. Mm.
That was an actual wetland.
It is a wetland. Yeah.
So,
They had to get state permits as well. So, yeah.
so are they actually enlarging the wetlands to replace for the lost square footage, or are they just planting?
Well, it wasn't the wetland itself that was displaced. We're talking about the buffer.
Okay.
So, yeah, the wetland's not changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's my kind of question about this. One of the issues with making such heavy impact on intermittent streams, small streams, little areas like this, is overall the impact on temperature, water temperature.
Yeah.
And plantings like this do very little for water temperature. So I was just wondering why not, since it's not a wetland and you're not actually doing wetland replanting, that maybe they consider using evergreens in those situations, so you have year-round habitat, not and cooler temperatures, because temperature is really an issue.
Yeah. I mean, they certainly could have proposed that. And the code just, I think there's a separate issue there, and I think it really has to do with the city's stormwater management permit, the MS4 permit that we talked about previously. The Public Works Department did a study of priority shade areas, and some of those are in the Natural Resource Overlay District as well. So I think, yeah, where those can be prioritized, great. But the fact is that they had a development review, and they had to follow code, and the best approach for them without displacing the wetland itself was to do it this way. I'm not sure we could have. Are you asking if we could have required them to plant evergreens off-site to have a greater impact, or?
Well, I look at that.
But I don't think we can allow. I don't think we can require off-site plantings.
Is this off-site?
Yeah. No, that's
So
the
what
first
about-
priority in the
so
code
my
is
question
on-site.
I look at this,
Yeah.
and it's like, we're 2 years into this, and what is there? There's not much.
Yeah.
And so, just wondering in terms of the you don't have to require them, but certainly request that they plant some evergreens, and why not?
Sure.
My question is, why not?
Sure.
Because it's not a wetland
Well, you could ask him
as
nicely.
such.
Yeah.
So
You
it's
know-
just a thought.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I'm wondering about, though, is
That could
with
be done
so-
anytime. Yeah.
With so much water storage underground, though,
Sounds
and
like a
thinking
great
about the
project.
drainage there, that water is going to be the average temperature of the ground, which is going to be a lot lower than the surface runoff. So I think if you think of the total volume of water leaving the site, the majority of that is going through their underground storage system. When it leaves the site, it's probably fairly cool, just because what's the average temperature of the ground in Oregon City?
I don't know.
But it's going to be like less than 60 or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, those are all questions that are worth asking. I think we probably could have asked them at the time, but the Natural Resources Committee wasn't functioning at that time. So this type of project would come before you today, and those kinds of things could be brought up. So that's good. What we rely on in this situation is David Evans and Associates, and they look at the code, but they also have a wetland biologist who's verifying what the applicant's wetland biologist is saying. So they get some peer review that way. Larger projects have larger impacts and can And I think the jug handle project is an alternative example where we could look at to show you, you get a real impact and benefit there by buying, as Bob said, off-site credits, which they did in Foster Creek watershed, as well as consolidating all of their mitigation area in one large location. Now, it has challenges in terms of monitoring and access as well, but each situation's a little bit different. Yeah. I think your point is well taken about continuing to plant. I think it's part of the Public Works master plan. Those are things where we nearly need to seek grants to do it. And I hope those recommendations come out of their LID update standards when they start working on those. Because the shading study was really good. It was I think it's about 4 or 5 years old now. It was done by Black and Veatch, but it's still relevant. And a lot of the areas that they identified are not on city property, they're on private property, particularly like Abernathy Creek and behind the county shop buildings. So the county need to be a partner on that. It really is all about finding partnerships in this case, and Safeway was a great participant here. I think the visibility of the project in one regard was a motivator for them to do something good.
Pete, the stream channelization is taking place to help use the bed for conveyance of water running through and stuff like that. Has anybody been looking at actually kind of dechannelizing, where you'd have more kind of a natural course instead of just having something really broad and shallow? Because if you're worried about water temperature, if you had something that was deeper and narrower, mimicked more a natural system, you wouldn't have so much exposure to the sun, because it'd be easier to have shade right up to the edge of the water when you have small natural channel.
Well, not on this project, but I've heard it, and I haven't seen too many projects lately that are big enough that would do that. I think we will see some in the future. For example, the area near the intersection of 213 and Beaver Creek Road, east where Maple Lane Court comes down. So in the future, I think that area will develop as a mixed-use area, and they will need to do an extensive mitigation for any development along there. And it's a channelized area, and I've talked to the developers in a preliminary way about what they could do there, and I think they're proposing of widening what's there today to make it more a wider corridor rather than a channelized corridor.
Well, I think I'm going the opposite way of what you're saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I'm thinking, because I live over near the park, Chapin Park, that channel there is kind of like a trapezoid.
Yeah.
It's really wide, it's got the banks that pull back, and there, even when water comes down, it's not a natural kind of channel.
Not a natural
it's
channel.
Just conveyance. What I'm talking about is that you could actually have a narrower natural channel with oxbows and going back and forth down that would keep water cooler because it wouldn't be exposed as much to the sun, and provide more habitat benefits because it could run more of the year.
And it's in the
instead of
park?
drying out. Well, it's right on the edge of the park.
All right, yeah, I think, some of those subdivisions around the park were developed under the older regulations, and they weren't as sophisticated in the way that they approached it. So they're operating under a different standard.
So what I'm considering is where you can is almost dechannelize the things and carve out more kind of natural stream channels and courses, as opposed to.
I think
what's
the
left
opportunity there is getting a willing landowner and finding the money to do it. Really, the Nature in the Neighborhoods grants are a great way to do this. We just need to find the time for someone to actually write one. So the deadline for those grants is coming up, and I wanted to talk briefly about that. Part Public Works Department would like some assistance from other departments in prioritizing project areas for a potential grant. So
Is that ad hoc committee or one-time meeting, or?
it's just an email that we got. So at this point, I thought I'd bring it to you guys' attention. Mary Rose Navarro is the staff at Metro that guides that process. I think you met her. There are several priority areas that came up in previous discussions about this, but I think it would be helpful for us to give them some guidance. Yeah. Okay. So that's a quick overview of the Natural Resource Overlay District. And I just want to mention that at the moment, we don't have any INROD reviews beyond the ones that I discussed at the previous meetings that are still deemed incomplete for other reasons, not because of the Natural Resource Overlay District, but because they have other planning issues that they're trying to follow up on. And when their applications are complete, that's when we will bring them forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, that was.
Dealt. So, I'll go back to my other position.
Okay.
Okay, so next we're up for member reports.
Okay. Let me start at this end. Do you have anything? Okay. I do want to mention a project that I'm engaged in. I'm looking at developing, in concert with the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council, who is working on different parts, but to get a Metro grant specifically for Waterboard Park. I recently found a pretty rare plant there. It's been, you could count the number of sites it's been found in the Portland area on your hand.
Really?
Yeah. And there's one plant in Waterboard Park, and 95% of its habitat is covered in ivy.
Yes.
And which, you know, it's a small fern. The thing is not even a foot across, but a very attractive plant. New York put it on their endangered species list because of collection.
What is it?
Maidenhair spleenwort is the English name, and it's one of the more older lineages of ferns, and looks a little bit like a maidenhair, but it isn't very closely related to them. It has some of the same characteristics like a black stem, and you know. But anyway, it likes to grow in landslides, and there's lots of landslides in Waterboard Park. So
I have one maidenhair fern
yeah.
in the canyon at the bottom. One plant. It's the only one I've ever seen. Maybe we should take a walk down there and go look.
Okay, is it the one with sort of like finger-like fronds?
With the black.
With the black, yeah. And
That's different.
This is a
There's the
spleenwort, huh?
maidenhair. The common maidenhair it's not like super common, but it's not rare. It's
And how do you spell the one that's rare? S-P-L-E-E-N?
Splenium. Yes.
Oh, so it is-
P-L-E-N-I-U-M.
It is a fern?
It is a fern.
Okay.
So I will look it on the internet.
Yeah.
There'll be a picture.
Yeah, there's pictures on the internet. It's actually spread throughout the northern hemisphere, except that there's never very much of it. The only other time I've ever seen it outside of cultivation is at the mouth of one of the lava tube caves up near in the 8 cave network of caves. And I've seen it in people's gardens because it is in the nursery trade. Of course, you don't know if they're collected in Georgia or here or...
The splenium one is in the nursery trade?
Yep.
It's just not
It's a very
occurring.
there's, they can use tissue culture and grow 1 billion out of, a few leaves, so.
Yeah.
And so, but you never know where, unless you have an unusually good nurseryman, they don't know where the original came from. It gets passed from nurseryman to nurseryman, and, well, it's the right species, but, it's from some mountain in Georgia instead of here,
Mm-hmm.
So, because it also grows in Europe and so on, It's very widespread, but just never very much of it. So anyway, that sort of puts a little iron to the fire, but want to tackle the ivy situation there, have city parks do a certain amount. I did hear that Larry Potter is retired. See,
Yeah, I heard I got an email about that. We all got an email about that about let's see, 2 weeks ago, and with the police shooting, it kind of got put on the back burner. So Larry, I believe, is retired as of November 12th.
so he's already gone at this
Right.
point.
It was kind of quick.
Yeah.
And Denise Kai will be stepping in his absence for the time being until they can hire someone else
Right.
or promote someone from within. I'm not sure what they're planning to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm thinking with the city's interest in an arborist or someone with more ecological knowledge, that should be taken into account. And someone with a broad skill set, in other words. Because the city could use that, and the city knows that. But anyway, this project would probably actually take place next year. Brian Vaughn has already indicated that it's just the sort of project they like to fund. So,
Right.
and that
In
was
Waterbury.
before I found the rare plant, which I decided to do this, and 5 days later I find this fern. It's
Well, for my part, Brian, and
Yeah.
I would like to. I'd be happy to help.
Yeah.
Write, a grant, and get PRAC involved, and
yeah.
and John Lewis to the extent that he needs to be.
And Denise
Yeah.
Kai is going to attend the in the field meeting with Brian Vaughn next month. And
Okay.
if someone from PRAC, the chair
Yeah.
or someone, would like to come along, that would be good.
Okay.
Or anyone else with the city that would be appropriate.
It sounds like, with the recent designation as a heritage grove, this would be a perfect
Mhm.
thing
Yeah.
to concentrate on.
And I've eyeballed, spent some time looking around. There's actually a perfectly clear section of landslide. It has no trees, which is unusual for this part of the world because everything trees over.
Yeah.
But the darn thing has a cotoneaster growing on it, which is, and it's even a species I don't recognize, which means it's been out of the trade for a long time. Because I learned plant materials back in the early '70s, and it wasn't, it doesn't. The characteristics aren't right for any of them I know, So and I found a cyclamen in there and another fern that isn't quite as rare. So there's quite a bit of stuff there, but it's very difficult because most of the park is a boulder field, just ivy-covered boulders, and we have to deal with that ivy, So anyway, but Metro is pretty positive about it, and I'm not sure which parks the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council is zeroing in on, but I'm going to talk with Rita at some point on that.
Okay.
But Brian Vaughn requested that everything, be put together in one big grant. So
Let's see. Yeah.
Have you considered access and community service sentenced individuals to help with the invasive removal?
that's a possibility. That's a possibility. But,
I put them to work. They have to show up because they're sentenced and stuff.
yeah, and they have to be watched. That's one of the problems.
That's true.
You've got road on two sides with invasives in between, so you've got to have police on both sides. And, because people have walked away or run away from those things.
No. These are like for misdemeanors. These aren't.
Yeah, just
hardcore.
minor.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's always a possibility. There's a possibility of using chemicals in some areas. Other areas will not be able to do that because of other plants. If the ivy's had, in other words, if the ivy's had time to kill everything else out, you can spray it. But if there's still other stuff, you're going to end up hand pulling. So that's the approach that's being taken.
Okay.
So
Sounds like we'd need to get several partners involved, including
Yeah.
Clackamas Sheriff's Department.
Yeah.
Potentially, as a,
there's a proposal to do, there's a major complex of homeless camps in Newell Canyon.
right.
And the police have already been contacted, and they're quite willing to take part when the time comes. Probably be next spring. I understand the garbage is about knee deep all over the whole area. So, yeah, right across the canyon from you.
Lovely.
Well, they come down from above,
Yeah.
down the freeway, and cut in, and that's where they're at.
Mm.
What's wrong?
Well, thanks, Brian.
Okay.
I've got, I think, one or two things. First, Pete, can I confirm? I thought I saw a note that the Blue Heron purchase fell through.
It did.
It did fall through. What happens now?
Well, the master planning process will continue,
Yeah.
and as far as the partners go, that that puts them under even more pressure to make sure the master plan is accepted and championed by the community. So to that extent, Walker Macy, the prime consultant, is working hard on putting together a really good initial vision for the site. And I apologize that
There's that fern for you.
I apologize that I don't have all the details tonight because I've been concentrating on the South End concept plan. But
Okay.
I'll
the
show it to Pete a little later.
they
Whose
did
job-
have. Go
Whose
ahead.
job would it be to
Yeah.
kind of market the site? Or, I'm just trying, what happens?
Okay.
It sounds like it's limbo.
Well, as far as marketing the master plan,
No, I mean the plan, I mean the site.
The site itself. If it's right now, the trustee is still
Sure.
responsible for the site, and would still be actively seeking a buyer. So it's out there on the market still.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think they're gonna continue to try to attract a buyer and one who has experience with mixed use development and restoration and old industrial sites. I think the most recent interest that the city commission has had was a great presentation by the architect. And did you attend that?
No,
Yeah.
I couldn't, but I read about
It was a presentation about the mills in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and how there were some similarities as far as the potential for reuse of those very large industrial structures, and building a really something that meets the legacy goals that they have for the site. And they also discussed the mill site on the Willamette River in Portland as well, and some of those similar challenges. But I think what's interesting from that presentation was how similar the waterfalls were, as far as, because and they were both power generating sources and had native presence long before the European settlement and those sorts of things, and they want to pay homage to all those. So it continues, and while we don't know from day to day what the actual development interest is on the site, the master planning process will only serve to enhance that, I think.
There's another issue that I almost forgot about is the high-speed rail line that's being developed and planned for right now, and it's going to go right along the side of Blue Heron site. One of the options would require new tracks, which there really isn't room for.
Is
You
that
know.
the preferred alignment that's come out of the process?
Actually, that one that would require new tracks the whole length of the valley would be higher speed, and it ranks higher than any of the other ones. It's also the most expensive. So I just
Yeah,
attended a
I
meeting on
see.
it last night, and there's the potential there's a lot of interest in our area to see a station put in right next to the Blue Heron site, which would be a really good way of, since there's inadequate parking and
Of
inadequate
access.
access in general, it would really up the access potentially for tourist use. So, but, you know, they hate stations on side hills, and, you know,
Yeah.
but a lot of people put that down last night in their statements, you know.
Was it well attended?
Moderate, I'd say.
Yeah.
I don't think enough people know about it yet.
Yeah, yeah.
John Lewis was there briefly. I met a couple of ex-state senators who were quite interesting. One of them was the one that carried Senate Bill 100 that established land use planning onto the floor when he was a senator. And he was a Democrat that worked and halfway lived in the office of Tom McCall, because Tom McCall got things done by working with Democrats as well as Republicans. You
Right.
know, he was one of the last great politicians in this country. And there's maybe Christie is approaching him in quality. You know, that's a maybe. We'll see.
Yeah.
But anyway, I thought it was rather interesting, and this thing just came out of the sky blue as far as I knew, but they'd already done a lot of work on this, and the money's there already.
No, I think there's a news link and feed on the city website about the light rail.
Yeah,
updates,
there's a big website up from the Oregon Department of Transportation, who is one of the main spearhead organizations, but they're looking for public input just like the Blue Heron folks. So, but I think the two need to get their heads together, you know,
That
because,
sounds like it.
you know,
One could leverage the other.
because where else are you going to put the railroad than right through Oregon City, you know? They did actually look at a 10-mile long tunnel through the West Hills, running north and south, which,
That's what Ted
They-
was talking about.
you know, the price was just way too high. So,
Mm-hmm.
but that's one of the ones they kicked out real quick.
Did they look at the west side of the river at all?
They can't find a good route.
Right.
You know, all the railways have been abandoned, if they existed at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, theoretically, you could run one through Lake Oswego, but, you know, that's not going to happen. And, you know, that was originally a transportation corridor right through there, because it was low right through the hills.
Mm-hmm. But then you
But,
get to the hills.
You know, they have actually 4 separate plans that they're bringing forward at this time. But one of those is only partially separate in the south part of the valley. After that, it follows one of the other lines. But there's also the possibility of mixing and matching these different things. They divided it up into 3 sections and showed each plan on each section. So there's a lot of information. That's all on the website. So if you want to get caught up, you can. So
Seen that.
Right.
let's see. I think I've got their website name here. Somewhere on here. OregonPassengerRail.com, I think, is what it is.
Yeah, I'm just
Doesn't
looking
actually
at-
doesn't actually give it on this handout I brought.
yeah, looking.
Should have put it on everything they had.
It's www.oregonpassengerrail.org.
.org. Okay. But I think they've got public input forms available and all that. So, okay.
Looks like they're having a virtual open house through November 18th. So we
Okay,
got
so that's another 5 days.
Yep.
They had good cookies. So,
Thanks.
okay. Any staff reports, updates?
Well, we talked about Willamette Falls. On the wall behind me, we have the most recent maps for the South End concept plan, which we presented in a work session format last night to the Planning Commission, City Commission. A lot of interest in this from folks that live down along South End Road, and Bob's been our representative on the community advisory team. public hearing, the first evidentiary public hearing to review the plan is November 25th with the Planning Commission, and then there's a second public hearing for the Planning Commission on December 9th. The first City Commission public hearing scheduled for January 15th in 2014. In the next 2 weeks, we will be, in the next week, we'll be presenting our staff report and putting it online for public review with our findings for compliance with Metro Title 11, which is the planning for new urban areas portion of the Metro Code, and we'll be discussing that staff report and presenting the comprehensive plan, map changes, and how those implement the concept plan to the Planning Commission on the 25th of January. There's going to be some additional analysis done for financing. This is a preliminary plan, and it sets the groundwork for further refined studies of capital improvements and things like that. But there's we've done a lot of public involvement. We did 17 community conversations, small group meetings, 4 large open houses, 2 online forums, and several surveys. So we've tried as much as possible to reach out to the community in a number of different ways. And so as far as concept planning goes, I think it's really been a good process for people to be involved with. Our community advisory team has been great. They've done 7 meetings and spent a good amount of their personal time invested in reading and providing feedback on this plan. So we really thank them for it. And we hope that it will be adopted and set this groundwork for a future complete community out in South End Road, although the timing of development out there is going to be very long term. It could take from 20 to 30 years for the area to completely build out. And annexations are voter approved in Oregon City, so that will certainly factor into it. So please stay tuned on that. Laura Turway, who's the planner in charge of the sign code update, has been working with their steering committee on that. They've produced 2 summary documents. One is a set of recommendations for code changes that should be made. These have not been to the Planning Commission or the City Commission yet. This is just a document that's under review, a draft. And then the second document that they've been working on is an enforcement document for how will the city approach sign code enforcement, because that's been an issue. We don't want to have a sign code that we aren't willing to fund enforcement of in the future. And so people have given feedback on that and what they feel should be priorities as far as that goes. And I believe those documents are now available on the Sign Code Update website, which is, pull that up for you. Sign Code Update Community Open House is on Monday, November 18th from 5 to 7 p.m. at City Hall. And for more details, you can contact Laura at 496-1553 or go to the website www.ocsigncode.org. Next item is our Tree City USA application renewal, which is going to be the next item on my plate. Actually, it is on my plate. Next to South End Concept Plan. I have to have the online application completed by December 15th of this year. So, that means gathering and compiling the information from 3 departments who have responsibilities for tree planting and preservation and maintenance in the city into one document and sending it up to the Arbor Day Foundation for renewal. So we're hopeful that we can get a growth award this year, but I think our biggest task will be setting priorities for next year's work, including potentially partnering with Friends of Trees and choosing a neighborhood association that was willing to work with Friends of Trees and the city on getting some planting done on the areas that need it most. So that'll be something to put on the city commission's work session for January. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to mention an issue of tree cutting that just happened in the promenade area. There was a request from a homeowner to remove some trees, and City Parks went ahead and did it. And there was 2 oak trees, a good 3 feet thick each, that were at the border of the park, and plus one other maple tree that actually did have some decay in it. These oak trees had virtually no decay in them whatsoever, despite statements to the contrary.
It's on Promenade, along the Promenade?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, towards the south end of it. The stumps are pretty obvious.
What was this?
This was done about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure of the exact date because it was observed after the fact. And there's a couple of locals up there that are pissed off enough to say that this should call into question the city's dedication to Tree City USA, because those were trees that may have been there before the city.
I did not know about it, but I'll
Yep.
talk to Scott Archer.
Yep. I didn't take any photos, but other people have.
Okay.
But I did go up and look at them.
Okay. What was the cross street? Because those cross streets are coming. Yeah.
Let's see. I'm not.
It's okay.
I went and looked at it. Now I can't remember. It was.
Like towards Bluff or something like that?
Well, it was right in the Esplanade Park, and it wasn't that far. It was before you. It was probably about 5-6 blocks before you drop down to the. Maybe 4 or 5 blocks before you drop down to the veterans place there.
Well, we're doing a better job of advising planning about any removals going on, and I'm surprised that we didn't know about these ones. So
Yep, it was done by City Parks.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'll get back.
Evidently, the
email.
homeowner was complaining about moss on the roof. So, and they just said, "Sure, we'll take them out."
Okay.
Could that be a formal agenda item next month then?
Well, I think
Just
at
to get
that
an
point,
update on.
I mean, yeah, I'd be happy to give you feedback
Sure.
on what I learned. Yeah,
Yeah,
That's all.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be
Yeah.
good to know.
Okay.
The trees were on public property.
Yep.
And
they
it
were-
wasn't on private property owners.
It was in response to a request from a private property owner.
People can just do that? Pete, just ask the public just cut down trees on public property?
Well, they do.
But just for private benefit of like one house?
No, I mean that's not something that is
Yeah, that's-
standard procedure.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's entirely
I-
discretionary,
in
I'm
the-
sure.
Public Works Department, if that sort of thing is, it's first the question is where is this tree growing? Is it on private or public property?
Right.
It's on private property, then it's the property owner's responsibility to deal with that. If it's on city park property, whoever the department manager or maintenance manager is, if it was a parks management issue, it should have been Larry Potter. If it was Storm Pond, it would be either Martin Montalvo, who you met, or Eric Hand,
Right.
who's the stormwater manager, who always comes to the planning department first and says, here's where the situation is, here's the report on the health of the tree, and what is the mitigation requirement.
Yeah, it's
Those are standard.
yeah. And that's what's supposed to
Now,
happen.
yeah, I mean, while the city is responsible for that maintenance, and there's different timing depending on whether the hazard is immediate or can be dealt with later, you know, we're still apprised of it.
Yeah.
So I'm very surprised.
Yep.
Um,
So was everybody else.
Okay. So, Metro's Nature in the Neighborhoods Restoration Grant. I think if we would like to make a formal recommendation for a site, we could do that at our subsequent meeting in December.
Is there a list of?
I can put together a list of potential sites, but we talked about the. Yeah.
Okay, so that's basically what I was just
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah.
and Rita and her group has several other parks. I need to get a list from her to
Okay.
you so that we know what parks are already, there's already people moving forward, and
Mm-hmm.
she has gotten parks people to come on this outing
Right.
that's in about 2 weeks.
Is it
Yeah.
something that we could
Yeah,
maybe
well,
tag along?
Yeah, if
Yeah.
other people would like to come along, I think that would be
So
fine.
is it
'Cause-
Thanksgiving weekend or?
no, it's before.
Oh,
Yeah. It's a week or so before.
okay.
Okay.
No, actually, I'm wrong. It's in December, about 6 weeks out. Because that's when Brian Vaughn wanted to do it, so. And hopefully it won't be snowing, so.
Mm-hmm.
Which is doubtful. It never snows before Christmas.
Yeah.
Hardly ever, anymore.
One other thing, now you mentioned Brian Vaughn, we have not seen the application yet because Metro is so meticulous in their planning when they're doing anything in Kenema. So what I think Brian had presented to you was some of the future improvements they would like to make adjacent to the Kenema Bluffs area to improve public interpretation.
Yeah.
One includes a overlook out to toward the bluff edge.
Yeah, that's been discussed.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they've done a lot of geotechnical surveys, and some of the recommendations that have come out of the geotechnical surveys are to place the overlook farther back, 20 feet back from the bluff. But then you create this potential for people to walk in front of it. So there's a safety consideration, and what they want to be able to do is anchor the platform to the basalt underneath in such a way that
Where it's solid.
Yeah, but there's a lot of unconsolidated edge, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they're talking about ways to maximize the safety of that while making it a good viewing platform as well.
Yeah.
So ODOT, because of 99E, needs to be involved as well, and we haven't heard back from them. And so they're following up with ODOT now,
Yeah.
and when they
That's
come
good.
forward, they'll be doing a geologic hazard overlay review for the overlook because it's right on the edge of the steep area.
Yeah, this
Mhm.
Waterboard Park is basically the northernmost extension of the Kenema Bluffs. So it's all one continuous steep area. So that's one of the key considerations here.
Pete, would you have any idea if, when they're looking at interpretive signage, if they're trying to make it fairly vandal resistant?
I think signage is something that can always be added and needs to be done right.
I mean, I'm just anything from pocket knives to spray paint. I mean, it's
Yeah.
Well,
The designs that I've seen are they're trying to mirror some of the historical things like the McLaughlin Bluff, but it'd be more rustic to match the natural area. So it's sort of a stone mounds with railings in between them, and that's the concept. But I haven't seen like a final design yet. I think the cost of these anchors that they're considering is really high. It's 10 to 20,000 per anchor to actually install them, and they make a hell of a lot of noise when they're actually making the putting them in. So they're concerned about what the neighborhood association thinks because of the blasting and the noise. So there's some input there. Anyway, that being said, we should be seeing that in the next few months, I think, which will be interesting. So I don't have any other reports unless you have questions for me, and I'll do my best to answer them. If I can't answer them, I'll jot them down and try to make it back to you with a report on our next meeting. Our next meeting date
11th, I think I saw.
Yeah.
is December the 11th. And yeah, so do people want to hold that meeting? Because I
think
certainly
so.
can.
That's a couple weeks ahead of Christmas at least.
Yeah.
I'm also going to suggest that, or invite the committee to my house to go on a Newell Creek Canyon tour
Oh, great.
for Christmas. So if we don't have the meeting, we could maybe do that date or set another time.
Okay.
It's hard to find
Okay.
times.
Yeah, sure
but,
is. Yeah.
Have to be in the daytime. It couldn't
Yeah.
be night.
Yeah. Okay.
Because there's been some work. Metro did do the first round of ivy and holly work at my house. You get to see after some months what that looks like, and plus
That'd be
just go
great.
down the canyon and have a potluck.
Well, if we're not deliberating towards any decisions, so we can do field trips, and that's perfectly
It'd be like
okay.
hot cider versus punch or something like that.
Yeah, punchy.
Sounds good.
So, well, what do we do? Put out some dates or?
Well, I think we can probably, I would say, just email or phone call around and choose a day that's going to work. But if we don't want to hold our regular meeting on the 11th, we can do it. We can do it then.
Except it's dark.
Except it's
Yeah,
dark.
yeah.
Well, you would have to
Yeah.
do it in the afternoon.
During the
That's all
day,
there
or
is to it.
the Friday, which is the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
I don't know.
Challenge fate, yes.
How do you guys think? I'll just bounce it off the rest of the members
would you
via
know what-
email.
Maybe, I think we're talking about two different things, so it
Sure.
sounds like there's things coming up that kind of deserve meeting attention by
Right,
everybody's there,
so
but
future
at the same
agenda
time, I'm up
items.
for a party, but this maybe needs to be two different tracks.
That's fine.
So I think as far as future agenda items go, we want to prioritize what it is we'd like the city commission to consider as a goal and objective for natural resources for 2014, which will help us define our work plan.
Yeah.
So we'll do that at the next meeting. Mm-hmm.
Well,
And taking
that would need to
suggestions.
happen in December then, wouldn't it? Or-
Yeah, yeah.
So that may take up the whole meeting.
That could make up the whole meeting.
We could just make that the meeting.
With a
Certainly
few
could.
updates, trees and stuff.
Yeah, I think it will probably will take up the whole meeting.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Do we have
Is there-
anyone we know who's good at helping
Facilitating?
people? Yes.
It's a great question. Other than me.
That might be willing to volunteer.
Would you know,
Um,
maybe it'd be good just to have some kind of structure
Yeah.
in place ahead of time, just some kind of things to help get people in the right frame of mind.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, just kind of like structure even our prep for that, so that when we're doing it, we're giving it due discussion, but we're not like just focusing on any one person's thing and not getting the whole range of what we should be considering.
Um,
And maybe also just try to figure out how do we present that with city, the city commission, so that they can go ahead
I
and.
have an idea. I attended an Onward Oregon gathering at the Environmental Learning Center a while ago, and the whole process was just what it is we're looking at doing. And So we all got together and you identify the priorities and stuff, and the end result of it is I have these sheets that show the priorities, the goal. They sort of fall out as a natural process of this. Maybe that's something we would want to do in a more informal gathering, like, because there's not so many of us, it wouldn't take so long. There were 30 of us there
Mhm.
before, so that was a long process.
Mhm.
But it was a good process. It was simple and really well organized. They've done lots of them, and I would suggest we have some structure around what it is we're going to be doing.
Okay, yeah, I agree. And that was Onward, Oregon?
Onward, Oregon. Mhm.
Okay.
I could ask if they would be willing to do that,
That'd be great. I'll be happy to talk to them and
because they're
see what
not
we can
political.
contribute.
They're just community-based,
Right.
focused.
They're not a volunteer organization, I take it, but.
I think
yeah.
they are.
They are?
Mhm, totally. Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Well, even better. Great. So that'd be a good thing. Thank you. I'm also thinking maybe there are some interns or at the PSU planning program who are looking for projects who might want to do this.
Mhm. I think we need help, though.
Yeah, I agree. For
Outside.
some training
Right.
facilitation. Mhm. More than ever.
Herding cats.
Yeah. Good. Thanks. Yeah. So let's team up on that, and I'll be happy to help.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And that is pretty much it.
Okay. Well, if there's no further discussion, I'll go ahead and say the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.